Welcome to Sex Afflictions and Porn Addictions. I am your host, Craig Pera, the founder of the Mindful Habit System. And today we're going to be talking about mindfulness basics. This is like basic training, mindfulness style. And I wanted to do this broadcast to, one, give you a basic overview of what mindfulness is, and give you like 3 swim lanes, right? If you can picture a swimming pool, to be successful here, you can't just be doing one right thing. A number of things have to be moving in the right direction. And the same is true for mindfulness because it has different aspects. I'm going to explain that to you, okay? So I look forward to talking about mindfulness today. So what is mindfulness? Let me start with a definition. So mindfulness is the quality or state of being conscious or aware of something. It is the mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment while calmly acknowledging and accepting one's feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations, and it's used as a therapeutic technique. So it is a tool. It is a therapeutic technique. It is a technique. It is a way of life, and it must be your goal. It is so important. In fact, I think it's mandatory. Mindfulness is part of my fundamental 5 because it's absolutely critical to sustainability. There's no way you can counter the decades of programming that manifest in that moment when you react, right? Because if you've been listening to this podcast, we've talked about recognizing the reality that there's no universe where you don't get triggered. I'm talking about the non-sexual triggers. You don't experience shame. You don't experience failure. You don't experience loss, suffering. So mindfulness, just like physical fitness and just like social fitness, there needs to be another swim lane of mindful fitness. And to help you cultivate mindful fitness, let's right now do a very, very simple mindfulness exercise, and we can do it together. And all I ask that you do is to pay attention to whatever it is you are doing right now. And you can even just notice all the distractions. Maybe notice the overwhelm. Maybe your mind is bouncing all over the place. And one way to be mindful is to look inward. And one way to do that is to focus on your breath. Just obsess over it right now, just for a few seconds. Like really, with your mind's eye, pay attention to the rise and fall, cool air entering the nostrils, the thoughts bouncing around in your head. So mindfulness is being in the present moment on purpose and not judging all those crazy thoughts in our heads so we can be proactive instead of reactive. Okay? It is so important because mindfulness has been scientifically proven to reduce depression, reduce anxiety, reduce PTSD, to reduce symptoms of other psychiatric conditions. It has been scientifically linked to well-being. It is used by Olympians, executives, professional athletes, Navy SEALs, as a way to sharpen their saw and to be able to operate at that next level. And that's why it's so important. So important. In fact, so important, whatever you're focusing on, if mindfulness isn't taking up 30% of that time, I'm telling you, it's one of those things that you start doing and like working out, you don't see anything, you don't feel anything, but then you react better. Then you're able to exercise self-control a little bit better. And there's a spectrum of growth around mindfulness where it is actually being used to minimize physical pain. You can use mindfulness expansions of the simple 3 techniques that I'm going to share with you. Literally, iterations of the 3 techniques that I'm going to share with you. There are others, but these are part of it. Scientifically proven to reduce physical pain. If you're using pornography to numb, cope, and escape, well, you are using it to manage physical pain. Emotional pain is physical pain. Physical pain is emotional. It's all inexorably intertwined. In fact, we're living through the destruction of that mental physical barrier that has existed in medicine for so long. Because we've learned that these mental conditions have significant physiological manifestations. In fact, they are part and parcel of the condition. And so when you put that in perspective and think about the training, right? So when you have a negative reaction, let's just think about right now the last time that you had a negative reaction. Let's just kind of picture that in your mind, right? That response where you got angry, where you got defensive, or where you shut down, or where you were triggered to act out sexually, or you automatically, instantaneously started self-deprecating. That's not some outlier event. That's not some weird occurrence. That is literally the result of decades of training. Just like as if I threw a ball at your face and your hand instantly came up to protect your face, that automatic instantaneous reaction is trained, is conditioned. And so mindfulness is the counter to that conditioning. Right? And it's why I call my business the mindful habit, because to be mindful of your habits is to be able to not just change them, but to sustain them, to build an identity around that, make a habit part of the equation. And again, it's in the title because it is so important. It is so important in so many different ways. And if you're listening to me live, and if you have any questions about mindfulness, please put them in the chat. I promise to answer them. But let me give you 3 very, very, very simple mindfulness exercises. And literally these 3 areas, one of them can give you immediate results, like something that you can do right away. The other 2 take training and conditioning. But typically what happens is that just by paying attention and bringing some focus to not reacting, training the brain to do something else, you just start getting better results in your life. So first, in the moment mindfulness. So in the moment mindfulness is the mindfulness that's necessary when you get triggered, when you get a sexual trigger, when you get a non-sexual trigger to lie, to shut down, to get defensive, to self-deprecate, right? Whatever's happening around that automatic instantaneous, here's the reality that you're never, ever, ever going to get to a place where you eliminate those triggers. I think that day comes when you're in the box. When it's over, that's the day, maybe when they stop. But the God's honest truth is that nobody listening to this podcast is willing to do what it takes to eliminate those triggers. And apparently there's a structured discipline in the Augustine monk tradition, in the Buddhist monk tradition, where you dedicate 20 years of your life to focusing on your breathing in a mountain, eating rice every day. Apparently those guys don't get triggered. And of course, there's the story of the monk in Vietnam who lit himself on fire without flinching from the lotus position, meaning hands, legs crossed, hands folded. And as morbid as that protest was, his not flinching said a lot about the capacity of mindfulness. Monks' brains have been studied. The good parts are lit up. The parts that you don't want to be aren't. They have incredible, self-control. And that's what we're talking about here, self-control. So in the moment mindfulness, first the concept, then the tool. The concept is what you're trying to do is, since you're not getting rid of those triggers, what you're trying to do is to use your awareness of that trigger and that thought to do something else. So let me use a really simple example. Fortunately, doesn't plague me too often, but infrequently when it does, I know exactly how to respond to this trigger. So throughout my life, I'd have anger issues, grew up with terrible anger, violent anger at times. And I've been angry. I've thrown things. I've punched walls. And that's just not me anymore. I live a beautiful, peaceful existence. But there are times when I'm down, when I stub my toe, when I'm sick, when something happened at work, when I fumbled all over a podcast and drooled on myself and embarrassed myself, when I'm self-deprecating myself, and something will happen that'll trigger that anger. And remember, triggers, biologically hardwired, aren't going away. So one of the things that I learned in paying attention to my triggers, and why it's so important for you to pay attention to yours, is because those triggers have a physiology. And in this case, like clenching my jaw, right? Instant, do something else, right? Nothing good comes after that clenching. So that's an example of using your awareness of those triggers and those thoughts to drive positive action. That's in the moment mindfulness. That is something that you will, continue to do, continue to get better on. And listen, guess what? You don't have to look very far to train yourself in that. Like, that's your reality, right? That your reactions to your negative reactions are the single greatest cause of problems in your life, or you're reacting, right? And so your focused intention on bringing space to that moment, the famous quote, between stimulus and response, there is space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. And in that choice lies our growth and our freedom. So that's in the moment mindfulness. Okay. The second thing that I want to share with you, which is really popular, so you can go out and research this and you'll see some articles, you'll see some scientific studies around it, and it is called box breathing. So in the spirit of physical exercise, practicing this technique is something that takes time. takes patience, is incredibly frustrating, really like annoyingly irritating, which is part of the mindfulness journey to do. And so, what I recommend is that you anchor this new habit, right? So, you want to practice box breathing, do your research, check out the science behind it. It's just such a neat, structured breathing technique that you can read about, out there. It's so easy. It's so easy. No. It's easy to understand what to do. It is ridiculously difficult to execute. So, one of the ways that I train mindfulness in my programs is by recommending 1 minute of box breathing per day. Or just even before we get to box breathing, 1 minute of counting your breaths per day. And the reason by starting so small is because, one, I want clients to create systemic, sustainable change, right? That doesn't come from the sprinting and then the falling flat on your face. That comes from changing the underlying system. And what you learn, and I'll talk about box breathing in a second, but anchor this new effort to something else that you're doing today. So let's say as soon as you get out of bed, right foot hits the floor, left foot hits the floor, boom, that's when I'm going to do it. Right? I just relieve myself. That's when I'm going to do it. I'm looking at myself in the mirror, getting ready to brush my teeth. That's when I'm going to do it. So you anchor this technique. And why like only a minute a day? Because it's ridiculously difficult, right? The mind is bouncing all over the place. You're here because you are so reactive. Right. And those reactions are causing significant consequences in your life, and you have to become more proactive. So here's box breathing in a nutshell. Box breathing is an inhale, like 4 count. So you breathe in, count 1, 2, 3, 4, and then hold for 1, 2, 3, 4, and then slowly exhale for 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold for 1, 2, 3, 4. Now do it. Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Slow exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it at the bottom. 2, 3, 4. One more time. You count. So there is so much power in your breath and training your mind. So that's box breathing. And just to recap what we talked about before, we talked about in the moment mindfulness. We've talked about box breathing, and we've talked about the importance of anchoring this new habit to an existing one. And it's at the same time every day. Same time every day, right? The more work you do on yourselves, the more you realize we're creatures of habit. So whatever awareness you have today, multiply it by like 1,000, by magnitudes of what you know. That has been the consistent, son of a gun pattern, son of a gun pattern. So the more you dig, you will continue to see those patterns, and the mindfulness is the counter to those patterns. It is the interruption of the automatic instantaneous, right? It is the space between thought and action. For the third type of mindfulness and exercise is what's called active mindfulness, or walking mindfulness, walking meditation. So a lot of people struggle with sitting and breathing. Let me know in the chat if that's you. If you struggle with sitting and practicing mindfulness, and you feel like you can only last a second and you want to pull your hair out of your head, and it actually drives you crazy. And frankly, it feels kind of stupid and you're totally not doing it right. And this can't be the right way. This isn't working. Why am I wasting my time? If that's your experience, you are not alone. You are not alone. Now, for all those reasons is why you should be counting your breaths in, out, one, in, out, two, or doing box breathing a minute a day. And of course, over time, that minute will grow and you will see tremendous results where you're able to not just manage your triggers, but actually impact the way you respond to physical pain. Like that's a reality. That's not some mythical, magical place. That place has been documented. A number of people can tell you. I can personally tell you that my mindfulness impacted my chronic pain in ways that when I was in my worst chronic pain, and I went to talk to a friend in medicine that I respected, and I was desperate and I needed help, and I'd ruptured my brachial plexus and I wanted to go back on pain medication. I knew I couldn't live like I was living in surgery, and they wanted to operate on my neck, and I was at just a low point. And I talked to my friend, and he tells me to breathe and practice gratitude. Like, now, I'm the owner of the mindful habit, so I certainly appreciate the power of mindfulness, but that's what he said. And I was offended. Thank you. Great. Thank you. Appreciate the advice. Then he recommended to me this Dr. David Hanscom. And Dr. David Hanscom forced me to apply what I teach to clients on myself. And I went, son of a bitch. Holy crap. My chronic pain dropped to levels that I hadn't experienced in a decade. Like longer than that. And so that taking offense to these, just breathe. No, that's not what he meant, right? There was more to it than that, but that's all I heard. So the third part, if you struggle with sitting mindfulness, do more sitting mindfulness. And you can practice what's called, now listen, you've got to practice being a little mindful now, not to get totally irritated by that frog I have in my throat. So thank you. But that would be an example of mindfulness, focusing on the message, for example, noticing the mind attaching, looking for reasons to insult and to criticize and to, maybe dismiss, right? So, again, always paying attention. So I'm overcomplicating active mindfulness. Active mindfulness is just paying attention to whatever it is that you are doing. So meaning, simple example, if you are walking, walk. And in other words, if you're walking and listening to music, walk and listen to music. And that means have the mind focused on the movements of your body, focused on the music that you're listening to. Now, I'd recommend you take the music off. You can pay more attention to what's happening in your mind, right? And you're looking at a geyser. You're looking at a national monument. You're looking at a flowing river and noticing how it feels in your body, noticing all the distractions that you're having, noticing where your mind goes. And when you're sitting and talking with somebody, sit and talk with that person. When you're drinking water, this is a great place to practice active mindfulness. Eating and drinking are two great places to practice active mindfulness. Waiting in line is a great place to practice active mindfulness. Driving is a great place to practice active mindfulness. And so, for example, as I'm drinking my water, just noticing the inhale that I took and putting my lips to the straw, noticing, and my first thoughts were, people who are watching this, I look like a bad word that a child would call another child growing up in the 70s. When I suck on the straw, I thought that the water hitting my lips, going down my throat, and feeling it in my hand. So that's it. Now, that's not it, but that's an amazing place to start. And what you're doing by practicing active mindfulness, you want that to grow so you are living a mindful life where you are present, where you don't sweat the small stuff, where you are intentional, where you regulate your central nervous system proactively. You understand the levers that you can pull to help you regulate that central nervous system in a healthy, constructive way, right? So that's all being mindful. Like I said, it's not just a tool, not just a technique. It is a way of life. And once you get bit by the bug, every negative reaction that you has becomes a growth opportunity. Like, what was it about that moment that had me being unkind to someone I love? What was it about that moment where I had just felt really good about myself for what I said, and I was feeling really, really high in that moment, feeling secure. And then as soon as I had that feeling, I automatically, instantaneously felt like a worthless piece of shit. Why? Right? And so mindfulness gives you a tool to be more proactive. It gives you a framework. And there are a number of great apps out there like Headspace and Calm and Insight Timer are three great apps. UCLA has a free mindfulness app. John Kabat-Zinn has on YouTube mindfulness-based stress reduction. There are mindfulness videos on YouTube for the internal family systems model. So there's a lot out there. But for purposes of the third prong, and then I'll review them, and welcome Paul, who just joined us. Active mindfulness is paying attention to whatever it is that you are doing. Whatever it is that you are doing. And what happens when you do that, you notice the difference. There's a delta, right? The little triangle from math. That means the difference. There's a delta. There's a difference between when you're present and when you're not. You begin to feel it. It becomes a different state of being, and it is a different physiology, right? When you get triggered and you're reacting, right? Getting angry, shutting down, getting defensive. There's a physiology. That response is a deeply ingrained, trained, conditioned response. So active mindfulness is really practicing the state of mind that you want to have all the time. All the time. So when that energy shifts, so let's bring it back, right? So we just finished with active mindfulness, paying attention to whatever it is you're doing to the exclusion of all else. When you're eating, eat, drinking, drink, sitting, sit, relaxing, thinking, think, etc. active mindfulness. Great, great, great tool for people who are really struggling with the sitting stuff. But so we talked about active mindfulness is being a state of mind, right? Living a life where we're present, not reactive, on our game, ahead of the ball. And so what disrupts active mindfulness? What disrupts you being present and in the moment assault, the trigger? So that's where we started. Part one of our mindfulness training was learning about in the moment mindfulness. And in the moment mindfulness is where you use, follow me here, you use your awareness, right? Mindfulness is awareness. You use your awareness of the trigger and the thought to prompt, cue, trigger something else. Because we accept the reality that there's no universe where we're not going to be triggered. So mindfulness means that you are aware of not just what that trigger is, but how it feels in your body, right? When you get defensive, when you shut down, when you get angry, when you feel small, when you get triggered to act out, there's a physiology, right? So that's in the moment mindfulness, responding to that, recognizing, wait a minute, hold up. Like I just said in my brain about my wife, and I'm going to be real blunt and honest here, guys. I'm not perfect. I don't mean to ever, proud of what I have accomplished, but I have had times in recent history, probably 2 times in the past 6 months, where there was a confrontation with my wife, escalating volume. And I thought to myself, fucking bitch. I had that thought. And I'm not embarrassed. It is what it is. I have said those things out loud in the past. I've said those things out loud. Mean behavior. So now, right now, when I have that thought, there's a program that fires that says, not cool. You're not making this situation better. You probably need space. And it's best that you stop talking. Right? And so, for those of you who've been paying attention to and following me, part of that in the moment mindfulness from the part's perspective is what part was awakened? What part was awakened? And if those of you who are unfamiliar with parts work, please dive in head first. Talk about it with your therapist. Read about the internal family systems model. Watch on YouTube videos by Dr. Richard Schwartz. Buy and read the book, No Bad Parts. Because the parts work is mindfulness work. So the first tool that we talked about was in the moment mindfulness. The second one that we talked about falls into the category of a focused breathing. And that means just like you would go to a fitness class, just like you would go to the gym and lift weights, this is the training. Right? Training sucks in some regards. Some people, this is their opportunity to learn how to embrace the suck. And one way to learn how to embrace the suck better is by sitting and breathing. Like, ooh, wow, that sounds great. Wow, that's really deep and profound. I am telling you that by sitting and focusing on your breath, and there's 2 pieces we'll talk about. One is simply 60 seconds, counting your breath, inhale, exhale, 1. Inhale, exhale, 2. And what you're doing is you're training your mind to focus only on how the breath feels in your body and the counting. Inhale, exhale, 3. Okay, now I start, what am I having for lunch? And every time I tell this story and do this exercise, I think about that pastrami sandwich. Why do you think about that? Inhale, exhale, 4. So that is the essence, the basics of the mindfulness training. And one technique that builds upon that, where you can find a lot of great articles online, is a technique called box breathing. And box breathing is a 4-step process where you inhale for a 4 count, hold for a 4 count, exhale for a 4 count, hold for a 4 count, and repeat. So like a box, 4, 4, 4, 4. We also talked about making sure you anchor this new practice to something that you're already doing. Morning routine, evening routine, saying I'm going to practice mindfulness and not having time allocated to it is a recipe for failure. The third mindfulness technique and tool that we talked about today was active mindfulness, and that is training yourself to be present, which is a wonderful thing. Like, it's a win-win for everybody. When you're playing with your kids, be as present as you humanly can. And listen, that includes having gratitude. That includes being mindful of the incredible gifts that you might have, despite whatever pain and suffering that you might be experiencing. It means perspective that grows in practicing active mindfulness. And the result is deeper relationships, better connections, and a happier life where you are in control, where you are calling the shots, where the best parts of you are driving that bus, a beautiful bus into the sunset on the path that you choose until your day comes. Mindful and grateful for each day, each breath. You have your ups, you have your downs, and your downs suck. They're heartbreaking. They would and should make a grown man cry. If he's being vulnerable, his burdens are heavy. His burdens are heavy. And the mindful man is choosing his heart. Oh, that's awesome, Paul. Paul writes, he hadn't had a mindful thought till I was 40, now 53. This is an awakening. You know, people find themselves at this low point and they start their journey thinking they're just going to, learn how not to beat off to naked people, or not to, lie and cheat on their wives anymore. And it becomes a powerful awakening where they become mindful of how they got here, of their ability to compartmentalize, of the suffering and the pain that they might be causing in their relationship. That's hard, right? Nobody can deny that. That's hard, right? This is choosing your heart. It's hard to practice mindfulness. It's going to irritate the living heck out of you. You're going to feel like you're wasting your time. And then something's going to happen. And there's going to be a challenge. And you're going to realize, wait a minute. And listen, I say this to myself all the time. I recently personally navigated what felt like a manic episode, because I've been diagnosed with bipolar, and a long time ago. And although I don't think I'm certain I don't qualify for that diagnosis now, right? That up and that down. And I'm managing that up. I'm talking about it with Michelle, acknowledging how I'm feeling, sharing it with on the group calls, taking extra care of myself, implementing my risk management plan. And I said to myself, I was like, oh my God, this is the time when I would have blown a gasket. Like, this is the pattern. I was like, whoa, all right. Choosing my heart. Love it. Full steam ahead, baby. Full steam ahead. Yeah, I think Paul's right when he talks about most people not knowing what it is. And to be mindful, men, and this is what Paul's getting at, man, it's so heavy, is to be. You ready? The V word. Like, hello, give me a break, make me want to throw up. How could that be important and valuable and actually be helpful? Lo and behold, it's the secret to a great life, according to researcher Brene Brown: vulnerability. Mindfulness is to be present in that suck and having the courage, the strength to share what that low feeling might be, or having someone that you feel safe with to say, oh my gosh, my thoughts have really started to cycle dark. That's vulnerability. Or I failed. I made this mistake. I let someone at work down. I'm really beating myself up over it, right? That's an unburdening, right? That's so many things. There's so many things wrapped up in that, but that's vulnerability. And there is a TED Talk by Brene Brown that I invite you to listen to on vulnerability, where she, I believe, nails the case for vulnerability in our lives. And while she's speaking to everyone, you apply that to men. We are not trained to be vulnerable. In fact, when we are mindless is when those wounds get touched and the walls come up. Right? Think of, you getting defensive, or you deflecting a question, or you not being honest. When you unpack that, when you look at the origin of that trigger, when you analyze the training of that trigger, that reaction that you had in the moment, automatic, instantaneous. If you could do that, like boxing, you'd be a world champion. If you could react that fast, right? If you could pitch that fast, you'd be in the major leagues. I'm talking about that automatic, instantaneous, negative reaction. It is a trained, conditioned response. And so the practice of mindfulness, one, gives you tools in the moment to respond better. Number two, the ongoing practice, the mindful fitness with the day-to-day sitting, focusing on breathing, reduces the inflammation, reduces the activation, reduces the impact on the central nervous system, counterbalances that training and conditioning. So, in conclusion, whatever you do, start practicing in some capacity, in some form. And if anybody listening now has a question, please put it in the chat. Would love to answer your questions. And if you are listening and have a question, Google that question, find that answer, begin cultivating a mindfulness practice, and in the moment practice, a sitting practice, and an active one. Those three swim lanes moving forward, even if it's like 0.3% a day, will produce great value in the long run. Just like, and for those of you who've been following along and maybe doing your own parts work yourself, your triggers awaken your parts. Your triggers awaken your parts. So that part, right? That part that lies, that part that compartmentalizes, that part that lacks empathy, that part that gets defensive, shuts down, et cetera, is a trained, conditioned response. So if anybody's listening and has any questions regarding mindfulness, well, that concludes the formal presentation. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Welcome, men. Who do we got here? Say hi in the chat. Welcome, Paul. This is going to be re-uploaded and posted so you can go back and listen to what is mindfulness, why is mindfulness so important, why it's like literally almost everything, because there's a mindfulness component to all these other areas that you must create improvement on: self-care, self-esteem, accountability. Right? There's a mindfulness piece to each of that. Hello, Blazing Leo. Welcome. Good. And last but not least, there are some great apps that you like. There's no excuse because there's so many free resources on YouTube. You can watch like world-class lectures by the godfather of Western mindfulness, John Kabat-Zinn. It has roots, way before that in other cultures, an amazing, history, super powerful. And so check those out. Also the app Headspace, the app Calm. If you've got a few bucks and you want to package it, consider downloading that app. That'll make it more efficient for you. And I'm the kind of person, just tell me what I need to do. If I'm left to my own devices, my mind, I bounce all over the place. I don't have any structure, no accountability. I get overwhelmed and I don't make progress. So anyway, I need that path. I really needed a structured path to help me up my mindfulness game. And I am so excited. We are weeks away from launching our mindfulness training for men struggling with sex addiction and porn addiction. It is literally going to be super low price, guys. We're talking under $25. I am so excited. It's going to be less than that. I'm just giving you a number off the top of my head just to manage expectations. And it's like the best of what I've been doing with my one-on-one clients, with the group, and we've packaged all these great trainings together. So stay tuned. I'm excited to share that with you. The few people I've shared it with so far loved it. We're making some improvements based upon those recommendations. And it's for the person who says, okay, I believe you about mindfulness. What am I going to do? An app? What am I doing? What do I do? I've answered that question for you. And if there's going to be a few warnings in this mindfulness training, making sure that if you're participating, you're either working with a therapist or in a very, very, very stable place. And because we're going to do some parts meditation. We're going to do a couple of meditations from the internal family systems model. We're going to do a couple of meditations from the parts work perspective. So if you are completely unfamiliar with parts work, you're completely new to it, and maybe you've done a lot of therapy, but you've never heard of it, check it out. So I'll keep you guys posted. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. I hope you can have a wonderful, mindful week. If not, make it so. The obstacle is the way. That doesn't mean you need to keep creating obstacles in your life. And wherever you are getting most triggered, wherever you are getting most activated in a negative way, hey, there's also great opportunity in the positive, paying attention to the positive ones too. But make that a target. Make that an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to grow. Thank you, Blazing. An opportunity to learn more about yourself. And that's what I mean when I say the obstacle is the way. Don't keep creating moments to get triggered, but commit to learning and growing from each one, because each one, and especially the dumb ones. Like, let's say that you have a reaction where, your partner just asked a simple question. Hey, where's the cup? I don't know where the cup is. Leave me alone about the cup. And you had a quote unquote dumb reaction. Those are the best in terms of growth opportunities, because you're not dumb. You may feel like you have done dumb things. Why would you react that way? Well, you got to answer that question. There's a reason why you were trained to react that way. In part training you've given yourself, part training from your childhood, which is why when you go see a therapist, they, for many great reasons, talk a lot about childhood, because that's where the patterns were entrenched. That's where the belief systems were implanted. That's when our lens through which we experience the world was framed. All right. Thank you, guys. Have a good one.